Hi everybody, it's Josh Goodman at the State Archives of Florida, and this is part 2 of our series on resources at the State Archives documenting the history of St. Johns County, which is celebrating its 200th anniversary this year. Now last time we talked about historical records documenting St. Augustine and St. Johns County during Florida's territorial period, which is why I have up this gorgeous map from 1827, which is part of the Florida Map Collection. Today I'd like to fast forward to the 20th century and look at St. Augustine during the Civil Rights Movement, particularly some of the resources we have here at the State Archives documenting that period. Many of these resources have been made available online at floridamemory.com, but that's only scratching the surface. There's plenty more material in the collections of the State Archives on the history of the Civil Rights Movement in St. Johns County and elsewhere around the state. I'd like to start off with something really eye-catching, something we don't always have for every aspect of Florida history, and that's film. The State Archives holds several films that document the civil rights demonstrations held in St. Augustine in 1964, organized in part by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Let's take a look at one of the best ones. So the first thing I'll do is go ahead and get out of this map that we have here. And the Florida Memory website is just at floridamemory.com. You don't have to have a user account or a password or to pay to get into the site. And if I want to navigate to the videos, I just go to the Discover menu up here in the top left part of the screen and go down to Video. We've broken down the videos into several different categories, but the one we're looking for is under Civil Rights. If we didn't find it right away, we could always run a search for it as well. But I see the video that we're looking for right here, St. Augustine's Civil Rights Demonstrations. This is one of more than 300 films that we've made available online. These films are in the public domain, mainly because most of them were created by state agencies, and so they're public property. So you're welcome to download these videos and use them any way you like. Right here's the download button that you can use to download it in MP4 format. Alright, and that one's already trying to download itself, so I'm going to stop that. Okay, so these are great for Florida History Day projects, or if you're putting together an exhibit or doing some kind of a presentation on the history of any particular aspect of Florida history. These films are great. You can download them, chop them up into pieces to get what you need, and use them however you like. So I'd like to show you a brief portion of this film, but first I want to set the scene for you. St. Augustine became a hotspot for civil rights demonstrations in 1963 and 1964 as the city prepared to celebrate the quadricentennial anniversary of its founding. The local chapter of the NAACP teamed up with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, led by Dr. King, to stage a series of demonstrations protesting the continued segregation of businesses and public spaces around the city. Counter-demonstrations ensued, led by segregationists and even members of the Ku Klux Klan. Both sides stood their ground, which presented a challenging situation for law enforcement officials. This film that we're looking at here was produced by the Florida Highway Patrol, and it documents the interactions between law enforcement, the civil rights demonstrators, and their opponents on the streets and beaches of St. Augustine. So I'm going to move ahead to a portion of the film that I think really captures the essence of what's going on here, and then we'll stop after just a minute or two because I want to show you some resources that are related to what we're going to see in the film. So here we go.
What you know is right. Nightly demonstrations of from 200 to 400 Negro marchers paraded to the downtown plaza around the old slave market, where as many as 1,000 people would gather and gangs of up to about 150 whites attempted to attack the Negroes. Troopers who were working with city police and sheriff's deputies attempted to protect the lines of marchers from the attacking white men and youths who milled around the park. New lights were installed to give enough illumination to light the old park area. Several persons were injured, a number of arrests were made, and one state trooper was splashed with sulfuric acid, which fortunately was washed off quickly, resulting only in a slight burn. Martin Luther King Jr. and 17 other persons were arrested on June 11th in an attempt to eat in a segregated restaurant. King had been arrested about 16 times previously in other southern states in integration demonstrations. On June 15th, Governor Ferris Bryant felt the situation had become so serious that he found it necessary to invoke emergency powers to create a special state police force which had concurrent powers with Sheriff L.O. Davis and Police Chief Virgil Stewart to enforce the law. This was the first time that any Florida governor had invoked the special emergency police powers voted by a special session of the 1956 legislature, and it had the effect of accomplishing with civil law officers the same thing that could have been done by sending National Guard into St. Augustine.
I want to stop the film there so we can take a look at some archival resources that dig a little deeper into the events that the narrator was describing. First, he mentions the demonstrations and the counter-demonstrators who attempted to attack them. The State Archives holds a number of photographs from these civil rights demonstrations. Many of them are accessible on FloridaMemory.com. So let's take a look at how to find photographs that are relevant to the civil rights movement in St. Johns County or any other topic that you happen to be researching. Now, you can use, you'll see up here in the top right-hand side of the screen, we have a search box that will search all of Florida Memory. That's going to include all the different kinds of primary sources we have, photographs, historical records, maps, audio recordings, and video, as well as many of the resources that we have written about these things, including our classroom materials and all of that. So we could run a search up there, but we can, if we want to narrow things down and just look for a particular kind of resource, we can go to one of those specific pages, and that will help us narrow down our search a little bit. So here in the Florida Photographic Collection page, let's see, I want to type in Augustine Civil Rights. Let's see what that brings back. We can also specify a range of years that we want to bring these things back, but I think we'll be all right just saying Augustine Civil Rights. And right off the bat, we're seeing still shots. As a matter of fact, you could just about see these still shots having come from the film that we just watched. Examples of demonstrators and counter-demonstrators being arrested during the course of the program. Here's a, let's see. There's one there. Here's both sides during the attempt to integrate the beach on Anastasia Island. We've got photographs of Dr. Robert B. Haling and Lynn Murray. Dr. Haling was a main leader in the local NAACP chapter in St. Augustine, and then Lynn Murray was from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And so we've got photographs of folks like that. There's another photo of Lynn Murray. And we've also got a photo of Ralph Abernathy and Martin Luther King Jr. at a press conference here in St. Augustine. And we actually, this is a still shot from a press conference that is shown later on in the film that we were just watching. So if you'd like to see Dr. King actually sharing some remarks from the moment that this photo was taken, you can look later on in the film that we were just watching. The narrator also mentioned the special police force that was established by Governor Ferris Bryant. Because this police force was created by the governor's executive authority, many of its activities were documented in a slightly different way than law enforcement activities normally would be. And so a lot of records dealing with this episode are located in the governor's own records, which we have here at the State Archives of Florida. So let's take a look at how to access some of those records. So if we go into the Discover menu and we look under Historical Records, these are a few examples of some of the most popular record collections we have, but if we click on View All, or if we click on Historical Records in one of these places, it'll take us to the full menu of collections of historical records that we have. And you can facet these out by subject or time period. Lots of different ways to slice and dice the data here. But what I'd like to look at is one of the newest collections that we have available online, which we call the Florida Governor's Records. Now, I should say at this point that the Florida Governor's Records only provides a selection of the material that we have available at the State Archives from Florida's chief executives. There are many, 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 many cubic feet of these records available here at the archives, and what we have here is a selection of what we have digitized. Now this selection, while it looks small right here with all these menus not expanded, it may look small, but this represents thousands and thousands of pages of records that have been made available, particularly from Florida's territorial era. But we also have some of the early statehood era, and we're beginning to digitize material from the 20th century. Now, relevant to talking about civil rights in St. Johns County, one of the batches of material that we have recently digitized deals with that special police force that Governor Bryant created to supplement law enforcement agencies in St. Johns County. And so when we click on that, we get all the materials that come from the folder in Governor Bryant's correspondence dealing with this special police force, ranging all the way from the arrest reports and the weapons collection logs that the officers from that police force filled out day by day. But we have daily reports on the various demonstrations and counter demonstrations that the officers encountered. We have lots of records dealing with the recruitment of this police force, which actually officers from all kinds of state agencies, the Highway Patrol, the Conservation Board, the Beverage Department that was in charge of enforcing alcohol-related statutes, all those agencies contribute officers to this force. Now, I'm going to use a little tool here because I don't like having to flip through lots of pages. And so I want to show you a way that you can look at everything that there is in a set of search results without having to flip through a lot of pages. If we go to modified search and we go down here to results per page and we change that to, let's say, 100 or 200, something like that, that's going to make it a little easier for us to look through these records. Here we go. Now we should be able to look at all 61 items all in one place. And one of the ones that I'd like to show you, because I think it's particularly interesting and it just drives home how closely these episodes in St. Augustine are related to the broader history of civil rights in Florida and the United States in general. I want to take a look at these arrest reports and weapons logs, and I happen to know that if we fast forward here, these are organized in chronological order from about mid-June up through August or so. But if we go to page 70 in here, and we take a closer look, by the way, any of these records that you take a look at, by looking at the tabs up underneath, you can get a look at all the various information that we have about these records, who contributed to them, the dates, the language that they're in, all kinds of good information there. But if we look at the images, and we can even blow these up, I'm going to click on that to blow it up, and we can get a look. Look down here at number 86 in the list of arrests. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself was arrested by a member of the Special Police Force during the course of these demonstrations. As a matter of fact, he was arrested at least twice during this, charged with breaching the peace. And it looks like he was released in this case on his own recognizance. But we do know that on at least one occasion, he stayed in jail long enough in St. Johns County that he was actually transferred to the Duval County Jail. We know that because if we go back to our search results, we can actually look at a telegram that went from Governor Bryant to a county judge, or a circuit court judge rather, in St. Augustine, asking the judge to order Dr. King moved to the Duval County Jail. And the reason for that is because the jail in St. Johns County became very crowded during the course of all this. And so, again, any of these documents that you encounter in the governor's records or in our selected documents collection, you can always blow these up so that you can see them. And much like the film, these records are public records, so you can download them, you can use them in presentations or documentaries or any sort of display that you're working on. The same thing goes for the photos as well. So lots of great stuff for you to use in your own projects. But what if you're researching the history of civil rights in St. Augustine outside of this one episode that we've been talking about? The material that you find on FloridaMemory.com is only a fraction, and I mean it's a tiny fraction, of the expansive holdings of the State Archives. Florida Memory has about maybe 1/2% of the total holdings of the State Archives. So even though we have lots of great material to offer, you're going to want to know how to get into the full collections of the State Archives, especially if you're working on an in-depth research project on civil rights in St. Augustine or some other part of the state, or any topic in Florida history. So how can we see everything that the State Archives has on a topic? For that, we need to look at the State Archives online catalog. So I'm going to go to archivescatalog.info.florida.gov. All right, and that's going to take me to the State Archives online catalog. All right, now this is a little different from Florida Memory. It's a little bit more like a library catalog. If you've used the card catalog at or the online catalog at your local public library, this is very similar because it's going to give you a listing of the materials that we have, but unlike Florida Memory, it won't actually give you the page images themselves. But what it will do is it'll give you the exact location in the archives of where these things are located. So you can request copies through our reference desk, or if you happen to be paying us a visit at our research facility in Tallahassee, you'll be able to build a list of the things that you want to ask for, and it makes your visit go a lot faster. So, archives are organized a little bit differently than libraries. Rather than every single object having its own catalog record like you would expect to find in a library, archives are organized hierarchically. So we have collections or series of records, and within those collections or series we have containers and file units, which is fancy archive speak for boxes and folders, or maybe volumes, or whatever way the records may be organized. And then after we've gone through that those two steps, then we've got individual items. But the best way to look for materials in the State Archives collection is either at the collection level or the container file unit level, looking for particular boxes or folders, because those are going to have the most granular names that are going to have the topics that you want to look at. So let's say, for example, that we wanted to see what other records that Governor Ferris Bryant might have kept about St. Augustine or St. Johns County during this time period that we're looking for. So I might type in his name, and you'll notice that I'm putting in quotation marks because I want to search specifically for the phrase Ferris Bryant. I really don't want every other Bryant that we might have records on at the State Archives. I don't want those mixed into my search. You'll also notice that I searched at the collection series level because I'm looking for entire collections of material that pertain to Ferris Bryant. So what I see in the search results here is going to be any collection of records we have that has Ferris Bryant either as the creator, or in the title, or in the description of the entire collection of records. So we've got several in here, but I see the one that I think I want right here, Series S756, Governor Bryant's Correspondence. And if you look here, that's 77.75 cubic feet. If you can imagine a banker's box, a typical banker's box that you use to keep extra files in, one of those is approximately 1 cubic foot. So if you can imagine almost 78 of those lined up side by side, that's how much material we have just in that one series of records from Governor Bryant. And in this catalog record that we get by clicking on that series, we get a little bit of information about Ferris Bryant, we get a little bit of information about his administration and what is contained in this collection. But now we can go over here to this yellow folder icon, and that is going to bring up a little tree here that will show us what is in each box and folder within that collection. Okay, and we can see that it's organized in alphabetical order. A lot of the governor's subject files and correspondence files are organized in alphabetical order. You will find a number of other collections that are organized chronologically instead of alphabetically. We try to leave the records in the same system of organization that the records creators use. So you never know what you're going to get until you get into the catalog records and start looking. Now, I'm going to show you a trick that's going to let you look through these records a lot faster, because normally you would just have to sort of click through page by page until you saw all the different things that you might want to see. But I am going to go up here into the address bar and see here where it says Record Max right here. That's sort of a set of instructions that we're giving the server to tell us how many results that we want to see at a time. Instead of putting in 30, I'm going to put this at the maximum number of records that this database can show us at a time, which is 999. So it won't do 1,000, but it'll do 999. So here we go. Once that page loads, now we're going to be able to look at everything from A to Z that's in this set of records from Governor Ferris Bryant. And so we can now use the Control F function on our browser to take a look for something specific. So let's say that I wanted to look for civil rights or segregation. I could start typing that. Nothing by that term in here. So what about civil defense? Oh, here's a folder on civil rights that I could look for. This is series S756, box 22, folder number 1. What if I wanted to look up something specifically on St. Johns County? Let's see. Okay, Census Commission, transcript, St. Johns County. That's the only one I'm getting on this page. Now that doesn't sound right. So let me scroll all the way to the bottom here and see what I might be able to find out about that. How far are we actually going? Ah, look at that. We're only going through N for Governor Bryant's records. So let's go to the next page. So now we're getting 999 more search results. Oh, look here. Okay. Race relations. We've got information on the National Quadricentennial Commission, which is going to pertain to St. Augustine, since the quadricentennial celebration of St. Augustine was coming up. Let's see what else we might have in here. What about St. Johns County? Okay. Here we've got some folders on St. Johns County. We've also got some folders here on St. Augustine. Here's that Special Police Force folder that has been digitized. But then these folders, look up here, we've got legal orders and executive orders. Now that's probably going to pertain more towards the acts that were used to authorize that Special Police Force, plus any other executive orders that might have been associated with Governor Bryant trying to assist the law enforcement folks in St. Johns County with dealing with this issue. So I can also, in addition to looking for records from a particular individual, I can also look for records dealing with a particular topic. So let's say, for example, I wanted to look for records pertaining to civil rights. We just type that in, and again, I was searching. I'm going to go back real quick just so you can see that. Again, I'm searching at the series or collection level, so I'm looking for entire sets of records that deal with civil rights. Okay, and look what we've got here. We've got the Governor's Commission on the Status of Women, Governor's Advisory Commission on Race Relations. These records are coming from governors, and it makes sense that these are governors who were Florida's chief executives during the 1960s when civil rights issues were really at the forefront. But then we're also getting some records in here from later folks as well. There's Bob Graham, and let's see what else we might have here. Okay, yep, some stuff from Department of Education. You can imagine that that's a major civil rights battleground, so there's going to be some good records in there as well. So lots of good material that you can get through the State Archives online catalog. So how do you get your hands on these records once you find something that you want? Well, I'm just going to use Governor Bryant as an example again here real quick. And I'm going to go in to look at the folder tree to see what we have. Let's say, for example, that we wanted to look at a series of records on Aerojets, something like this. If we take down the information that we're seeing here about where exactly this folder on Aerojets is located, series S756, box number 1, folder 7, if we walk into the State Archives and ask the reference archivists, hey, I'd like to take a look at this particular folder from this collection. All they need is that code right there, the series, box, and folder number, and they'll be able to bring that box right down to you. Also, if there's something that you'd like to get a copy of, you can say what it is that you're working on and ask if the archivist can look for something very specific in this folder, and they can make copies and send that to you for a small fee. So lots of great stuff to take advantage of there. Last but not least, I want to show you some resources that we've put together on Florida Memory for if you're not really researching the history of civil rights in St. Johns County, but rather just wanting to learn about it, or maybe you are a teacher and you're looking for resources to teach about this topic. So a more casual way of engaging with this particular topic. So let's go back to the Florida Memory website. And we've been dealing mainly with material from the Discover menu, the nuts and bolts of history, the raw materials, photographs and historical records and film, and that sort of thing. But over here in the Learn section, we have a couple of other kinds of resources that you may find useful. The first is the Floridiana series. And these are a series of historical articles that deal with all kinds of aspects of Florida history, going all the way back into the Spanish colonial period and leading all the way up into relatively modern times. So if I were to type in, I'm going to type in Augustine civil rights, and let's see what we get. It'll take the database a moment to go through there, and here are our search results. It looks like 4 different items have come back that have those search terms in there. We've got an article on Butler Beach and Jim Crow. Butler Beach was a privately owned beach that was made available to African Americans by a Mr. Butler, Frank Butler, who had a grocery store in the Lincolnville neighborhood. And so, as a matter of fact, that is the grocery store right there, and then here's some photos of Butler Beach. So we've got an article on that. We've got an article on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Florida, which is of course going to contain some information about his involvement in the St. Augustine civil rights demonstrations. But we also have the online classroom, which these are resources that are primarily intended for teachers and students, but you may find them interesting as well, just for learning about. Lots of great stuff in here. We've got several different kinds of classroom materials. Primary source sets, those are groups of primary sources, mainly from the Discover section of the site, that we find useful to group together for teachers to use. We also have learning units that will take you to entire chunks of history being handled with lesson plans and articles and all kinds of good history that you can use for sharing these topics with young people. The civil rights movement in Florida being one of these. And of course, the film that we looked at earlier is one of these items that you'll find in this, because Florida, with its unique geography, one of the most interesting aspects of the civil rights movement in Florida is that in addition to sit-ins and marching demonstrations and other things like that, we also had wait-ins here in Florida, because desegregating beaches was, of course, one of the big objectives of the civil rights movement here in the state. Before we leave, I would like to give you some contact information for the State Archives Reference Desk. Here's their phone number and their email address, archives@dos.myflorida.com. Also, here are the addresses for some of the databases we've talked about today, the Archives Online Catalog, as well as floridamemory.com, and then also the State Libraries Catalog, which also has a number of interesting published resources on this topic, library.florida.gov. So that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this brief look at some of the resources of the State Archives of Florida for documenting St. Johns County during the Civil Rights Movement. Happy 200th anniversary, St. Johns County.